So hello and welcome to this webinar from the LGBT Innate Wellbeing. We're delighted that you've joined us here, whether it's live or whether it's in the recording that we're putting out. This evening we have got Tony Fiedler speaking about a very personal experience that he's had, and I'm sure that you'll be intrigued and amazed by what he's beginning to point to when we use the words like innate health and well-being. My name is Steve, and I'm part of the innate health and well-being team, and we've come together and we're doing a selection of things where our commitment to the LGBT community is seeing the social anxieties and the depressions and the many different things that seems to be hitting the community, that we have seen such a great transformation in our own personal relationship with ourselves and with each other. So we've committed ourselves to creating an online space, i.e. a website, which we'll be launching pretty soon. We're doing these monthly meetups. We're having physical meetups in London. We're going to be having retreats, having heart circles, and that list will go on as we go along. But it's what I say is for this evening, we have got a different way of looking at what mental health is. So many times as a psychotherapist, when I was doing my training, we were told to look at the illness, the mental illness of the person, never really addressing that inside every single one of us is a health that has a buoyancy, a natural buoyancy, which has got us from pillar to post, no matter what experience we've gone through. And tonight, Tony's going to be going a little bit more deeper into that with you. So I'm not going to hog the limelight. I'm just going to give you over to Tony, and I'm excited to hear what he's going to say. So welcome, Tony.
Hi. Can you hear me? Everybody
Yeah.
hear me okay? Yeah, loud and clear. Fantastic. Okay. Thanks, Steve. Well, first of all, to you guys that are on here, well done, and good to have you on board for tonight's call. I know how difficult it is sometimes to do something unknown, something new, to step forward, especially if you're feeling a bit anxious about life or socially anxious even, which obviously is a subject we're going to be talking to tonight. So well done you for being here, and a big thank you from Steve, myself and the LGBT wellbeing team. I guess I better mention, I found a new toy on the Zoom tonight, so I'm going to be trying to play with that. So hopefully it's going to work out just fine. But you'll see as we go along. I'm quite excited about this. I can do some visual stuff with you guys tonight as well to try and get some points across with you. But before we really launch into this, this is a safe space as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be kind of talking about my experience. I'm going to be pointing to a different way of thinking about mental health. Steve's already kind of pointed a finger at looking at mental health rather than the mental illness or the mental sickness. There's a big distinction there. And that's really kind of where we want to start focusing, because that's made a massive, massive difference for me in my life. Bearing in mind I have a diagnosis of social phobia, social anxiety. And I'll talk a little bit, obviously I'm going to be talking about that today, but it's really about focusing on well-being. That's what LGBT well-being is all about, hence the title, but the positivity, the well-being as individuals, because we're so used to looking at what's wrong, what's not right. The negatives in life, aren't we? You know, kind of, we've only got to switch on the news. It's all about the bad news all the time. And as human beings, we can quite easily get conditioned, fall into that way of thinking and thinking about ourselves. So I want to gently kind of point the finger away from the bad stuff back to the good stuff. And that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. So I'm going to talk for a while and then open it up for comments, questions, discussion. Keeping it on the positive track, guys, but I welcome each one of you to be part of this call too, because I know you're going to have some valuable experiences to share with others. If you don't want to share, that's absolutely fine too. There's absolutely no pressure on this call. This segment is being recorded, so once I've stopped doing my presentation, Steve will turn off the record just so that you do feel even more comfortable if you do want to share. Got somebody else just joining us here. Hi, is that Dora? Steve, if you don't mind just muting Dora. Dora, we're just about to start, so just to let you know, we're muting everybody and I'm just doing a kind of outline or a presentation on social anxiety, but welcome to the call. So before we really launch into me and my experience of social anxiety, I just want to, well, before that, actually, a couple of things about me. I have been practicing as a life coach, a trainer, well-being consultant, whatever that means, a strange title, but maybe for the last 4 or 5 years. But I've got a background over the last 10, 12 years of doing that type of work. And I guess what's a little bit unique about me is that I've worked a lot with people with mental health diagnosis and people that have been in a homeless position. I've done a lot of work with the homeless in terms of training and coaching. And then in the last 5 years, Steve and myself, we have been running an organisation, a wellbeing organisation called the 3 Principles with Life and Soul, which really is dedicated to kind of helping people to point them back to their own well-being, their own health, their own mental health. And actually, on preparing for this call tonight, I was gently reminded about some work we did about 3-4 years ago with people with social anxiety. Steve and I did a series of webinars, or took part in a series of webinars, and I'll kind of send the link out. There's some recordings around that that are available. There'll be we'll get the link out there. So that's us. Steve's also my life partner for the last 12, 13 years, whatever it is. So just wanted, obviously, because this is the LGBT sharing wellbeing group, and there's a picture of us, me and Steve together. We had the good fortune last year to visit the Grand Canyon, and very nice it was too. And really over the last kind of couple of months, we've really started to focus now more on working with the gay community, having had experience ourselves of hanging out with like-minded people in the last year or so, and really kind of connecting with other people. It feels timely for us to be doing this work and spreading the word in terms of what we're doing. So tonight, what it's about, and what I really want to get across to you guys right here, right now, is that this tonight is all about something called, just bear with me a second, insight-based learning. Okay? As opposed to intellectual learning. Okay, now we all know about intellectual learning because that's kind of how we've been taught at school, isn't it, really? Very much as, and please excuse my drawings here tonight, guys, but very much intellectual-based learning is kind of targeting the head, targeting the brain, okay? Teaching you information about life, about whatever the subject might be, but you're learning something as you go along, okay? So a good example of intellectual learning obviously would be maths, like times tables, 1 times 1 equals 1. And that's very much kind of what we want to get away from tonight. So if you've turned up, and it's very, very common for people to come to these things expecting to kind of learn about ways to manage anxiety or learn steps to feel better about themselves, what we're going to do tonight, we're actually looking at something called insight-based learning. Okay. Now what insight-based learning, that's a strange mouth, is it's much more intuitive. Let's try and draw a heart here. There you go. So it's more about kind of waking up something that feels right, intuitive, heartfelt, gut feeling maybe. And that's what I want you to kind of orientate yourselves to. Not so much listening from the mind from the head to what I'm saying and trying to make sense of it, but just listening and listening for a feeling, okay? Because what I'm going to be talking about might seem like a load of good ideas, but actually, somewhere deep inside, you understand this. People know this. And Steve and I have done so much work around this that we know this is impactful. And not only impactful, we've seen for ourselves, but also in the work we've done, change that's lasted with people. They've gone off from our groups or whatever, and you know, they've kind of found life easier. So just wanted to kind of outline that. If that makes no sense whatsoever, don't worry. As I say, nothing to learn here. Just settle in. We're here for the hour or the next 40, 50 minutes or whatever. Just soak it in. See what's there for you. Take what's right for you. And, you know, we're not trying to tell you anything that, you know, to go off and do. So hopefully that makes sense. Are you with me so far, guys? People can see nodding heads, or people, yeah, a couple of nodding heads, thumbs up. So we're on the right track with it. Okay, right. My personal experience, probably about 20, 30 years ago now, I am that old. And it's kind of after I first started working, I developed like a social phobia, a phobia of socializing, really. I worked for a bank in the city of London at the time, and there was quite a big drinking culture. People would kind of decant to the pub after work and socialize, and there was a lot of young people of my age there. So there was a lot of kind of boy meets girl stuff going on, and flirting and all that type of thing. And obviously being a gay man who wasn't out at the time, I found that extremely, extremely difficult to be around. And it made me very nervous, made me extremely nervous. And that nervousness developed into a phobia. And the phobia manifested into, well, I couldn't pick up a glass or drink out of it without shaking in the pub. It got that bad. It was, even thinking about it now, kind of, you know, I feel the heat of it, the pressure of it. It really was, it was quite a difficult experience at the time. So much so that I started making any excuse that I could possibly make to not socialise, to not turn up, you know. Pretended I had a social life outside of work, so I couldn't be in the work situation. And that went on for a while. I think that's when I started kind of looking, because I knew something wasn't right. And another way of putting that is I decided there was something wrong with me. So I started searching outside of myself for answers. I started looking or going for counselling, or trained to be a counsellor. I looked at spiritual kind of new age kind of approaches to managing things. I looked at the more psychological approaches like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. You name it, I had my fingers into it. And I'm not going to say that stuff wasn't useful, because it helped. But the experience still was horrible, okay? It got easier, but I still didn't feel right about it. And I still had this belief, this heading, that there was something wrong with Tony. Tony needs fixing. So I took myself off to the GP, and for the ladies that are present, as boys, I'm not that great at going to the GP talking about mental health. At least some of us are anyway. So that was a big step for me, and kind of outlined some of the problems I was having. And they put me on they wanted to put me on a waiting list to see a psychiatrist, which I think at the time, this was many years ago, it was about a year or so. But I'd made the decision. I wanted answers, and I wanted them there and then. So I kind of took the liberty to pay a private psychiatrist, who, guess what, gave me a diagnosis of social phobia, social anxiety, which kind of was nothing new to me. I kind of had worked that one out for myself pretty much. But it gave me the confirmation about what I was dealing with. So onwards I went and he pointed me at a few different approaches that might help, and I kind of took those up. I didn't go back to him because he wanted lots of money for them. But and so I went forward into life from there. And it was only about 5 years ago, really, that I kind of turned up as a well-being self-development seminar, feeling very, very nervous with 120 people that I didn't know. And there was this guy on stage talking about innate mental health. He was talking about principles, as in given facts about our psychological and spiritual experience as human beings. And something hit me between the eyes that came alive. It just felt so right, what he was pointing to and talking about, that I came home, and Steve's got his own version of this, but I started kind of talking about this in terms of this was the answer to everything. And Steve resisted that for quite a long time, but that's another story, which I'm sure he'll share with us at some point. But Steve will point to, there was a change in me. The way I was meeting the challenges in life was different, okay? There was something different within me. And I had insight. I talked about insight-based learning. Something came to light when I wasn't even looking that told me that a lot of my anxiety was being produced by a belief, a concept that I had about life, that told me that life had to be difficult. As kind of like I had this everything that came through in my experience was filtered through this belief that life had to be difficult. And it's almost when that popped into existence, the anxiety just drained down the plug hole, like the water does when we let it out of the bath. It was amazing, absolutely amazing experience. And then I realized that it wasn't even my belief that held that in place. It was a belief that I'd taken on from my parents, which might have been quite relevant for them because they grew up in times that were more difficult than the times that I was living in. So from there, it kind of, on I went on my travels and life became a bit easier for me. I still haven't had that level of insight on the social anxiety, but one thing I can tell you, I still feel anxious, I still feel socially anxious, but the experience of anxiety doesn't have me as much as it used to. I don't become it. And I just want to kind of illustrate that for you to try and get it across and see how we do with this. So what I'm saying is, the Tony in the past, and again, excuse my little funny drawings, compared to the Tony today with funny eyes, of the last, maybe 5 years, the difference is, this guy here, he would be operating with this belief that I am socially anxious. Okay. And from there, the next thinking that would come in at the back of that is people don't like me. I'll make a fool of myself. There's something wrong with me. Okay. And then I kind of superimpose that onto my sexuality. And then you're kind of back in the past when I was talking about my experience as a younger man, I believed it was because I'm gay. That's why I felt that way. I've made some decisions that kind of led to that. The difference now with me, for me, is I still feel socially anxious. And then there's a full stop. Because from there, I've lost my arms there, I don't know what's happened there, but I feel socially anxious, but I'm aware, most importantly, this is a really important point. Actually, I'm going to make a couple of points here. I'm aware that this, 2, shall pass. That it's just an experience. It's passing through me, a little bit like the clouds in the sky going over the sun. Okay, that sun still comes out. It's just part of me. And on the back of that, that there is more to Tony than this experience. Okay? And with that, I can feel socially anxious, but I don't have to become it, if that makes sense. Oh, I'm messing that up, but okay, so have a look at that. So from this, this guy here, he's very much got an identity of being socially anxious, okay? He believes that that's the experience. That's how it was for me. I am socially anxious, okay? There's something wrong with me. Now that kind of almost opens up gates to a load of other thinking. You start off feeling socially anxious, you end up feeling that there's something wrong with you. Now, I'm sure each one of you on the call here have got your own thoughts that you could put in between here. You could do your own diagram and come up with your own set of thoughts there. This guy on this side is much more in tune, much more aware. He's had insight into the fact that, well, I'm feeling that way, but I don't have to become it. Okay, it doesn't define me. It's just the state of being I'm in right now. Okay, I'm not socially anxious all the time. I know that. And I bet you every single person on this call has had that experience that you've been, well, yeah, we can take anxiousness out, we can put anger in there, we can put whatever state of being you want to put in there. But I bet you've had the experience of feeling really, really crap in life and then suddenly having a good time and laughing. And then remembering that you felt really crap and then feeling crap again. Am I right? Anybody had that experience? To see some nodding heads? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So what we're pointing to here is not in terms of controlling the experience as much as getting more in tune that the experience is coming from within us. That is a really, really crucial point to this, guys. We are having the experience. Okay, remember I talked about the pub experience. I used to go to the pub and feel really socially anxious. Well, the pub or the people in there or what the people were doing, that they weren't going, right, okay, let's all make Tony feel socially anxious. In my head, I put 2 and 2 together and came up with 2,700,000 and something. Completely did, creating the experience for myself and then believing it to be true. Okay, and that's all social anxiety is. It's an experience that we have. Now, I don't expect people to kind of like be jumping up and down at this point and thinking hallelujah. And some of you might be kind of getting an inkling into something that feels true here for you. But what we're looking at are principles, and I want to kind of now just move into that a little bit and outline where this understanding, how this has helped me, but where it came from in the first place, okay? And I want to talk a little bit about principles. And when I'm talking about principles, I'm talking about given facts, okay? So, gravity, that's a fact, that's a principle. I haven't got you on unmute at the moment, but I'm sure if I hadn't asked you the question, what happens? Well, do we all believe in gravity? Of course we do. We cannot not believe in gravity. It's there. It's a given fact. Okay, it's there. So gravity is a very good illustration as what we mean by principles. Now, I want to look at 3 principles that govern psychological experience. And then I'll go on and tell you a little bit about the guy who found this, because I think that might really help people to see this a little bit more profoundly. But and that guy was Sid Banks, but I'll come to him in a minute. But the principles he came up with, the first one is fault. The fact that we all think, okay? And I will assume that everybody on this call thinks. I would imagine that, you know, you would have had to think to get yourself onto this webinar. You've had to think your way through the day today. So it's a fact. Fault is a given. It's a principle. It's in action within each and every individual in the world. The second, and there's no order to these, by the way, but the second principle I want to point to, oh, hooray, I spelt it right, is consciousness. Or, if you don't like that word, awareness. We're all aware. Every single one of us are aware. We're conscious of life. We can see, through our senses, we can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Okay, 5 senses all help us with our consciousness. We're consciously aware, but we're also consciously aware on a deeper level. And I'm not going to go too much into this right now. And that's what I was pointing to with insight-based learning very much, is that consciousness. The power of consciousness is incredible. And the last principle is mind, that we all have a mind. We all have a given intelligence that we can rely on, you know, and there's a very, very simple illustration or example of intelligence to the human beings is what happens if we cut ourselves. We don't have to do anything. The cut will heal itself. It sorts itself out. The body's built for that. It's made for that, for healing. So it's almost like the intelligence behind life. That's mind, okay? There's a given intelligence. Now, if that works for us physically, why can't it work for us psychologically? And through the work Steve and I have been doing and are doing, what we're saying is that intelligence will take care of you psychologically as well, if you let it do that, okay? And I'll come back to that. It's quite an important point there. Okay, so mind, thought, and consciousness. Very simple, but we've all got access to these tools of life, if you like, or you could even call them gifts, because without them, what would life be like if we couldn't think, we wasn't consciously aware, and we didn't have an intelligence? We probably wouldn't exist, I would imagine. Okay. Now, quickly, let's show you a picture of Sid. Sid Banks was the guy who came up with these 3 principles. He had a major insight into this in 1973. And this all stemmed with a conversation he was having with a psychologist. Now, Sid Banks wasn't actually a mental health professional, a counsellor, a psychologist. He was a welder, and he had a very low education. It just happened to be talking to a psychologist. Sid was of Scottish descent and lived in Canada. And the conversation went something like, they were talking about insecurity, and the psychologist was saying how insecure he felt. And Sid said, well, I bet you're not as insecure as I am. And I had kind of this little kind of dialogue about how insecure each of them were. And Sid, in a split second, had an insight. He saw quite clearly that it was thinking, thought, that was bringing that insecurity alive for the psychologist. And it hit him so hard that he turned around to the psychologist, remembering that the psychologist is the one who'd been trained in this field. And he said, you're not insecure, you just think you're insecure. And the psychologist said, well, I know that, of course I know that. But Sid knew he didn't know it to the degree or the depth that Sid saw that. And from there, Sid then kind of had further insights, quite deep insights into life and how we experience life, that he knew the power and the impact of this understanding, which he then later came to call the 3 principles. And he really kind of worked. It's an amazing story, and we'll point you with some resources, or maybe we'll do a webinar on it to more detail. But there's renowned psychologists, psychiatrists that came in that direction, have worked with Sid to pick up that information, those insights, that knowledge, and their practices changed overnight. They started getting sustainable long-term results with their clients. Their clients started to change. Whereas before it was long haul, people were in therapy, and we're talking about the 70s here as well, for up to 10 years before that. So it made significant change. And the reason for that is that people started to realize that it was their thinking bringing all experience to life within them. So if they were feeling insecure, it was simply that they just needed to let thinking do what it does if we allow it to do, which is just move on, okay? And to think about that, guys, if you think about the minute you got up this morning to being right where you are now, I bet you've had lots of different kind of thinking throughout the day and lots of different thinking. Some good, some bad. Some experiences you felt great about, some experiences you didn't feel good about. But there's a flow, an up and down to that. And again, let me just illustrate to you what I'm saying here. So kind of experience for a human being tends to go like this throughout the day, up and down. Nobody, I would imagine, nobody, perhaps enlightened people, I don't know, but nobody has like a very sort of on the line experience where they're in the same state of mind from waking to going to sleep. We all go up and down in our experience. And you can put up here feeling good, down here feeling not so good. Now, what I used to do with my social anxiety is that if it came, if something triggered a feeling or a thought of social anxiety, I'd be kind of going quite along okay during the day. And then suddenly I'd think about it and think about it and think about it, and I'd feel worse and worse and worse, and I'd feel pretty crap. And then I'd have so much thinking, it would keep it in place almost, and I would just operate at that level for the rest of the day. Okay. Now, what I'm not allowing there is obviously for the old way of Tony being still, this was in operation, so I still would have had times when it would have come back, and it was still playing out these three principles. But what I didn't realize is that I was creating that experience for myself. Okay, so I kept it in play there. Now, fault, it's like a river of experience going on throughout the day. So that, if you can imagine, bear with me, I should have made that blue. I think I can. Maybe I can't. This is all new to me, by the way. Pretend that's a river, guys. Actually, let's do it in blue to illustrate it. I'm not really a perfectionist. But that's like a river of thought, okay? So along we go. We have different thoughts during the day, throughout our day as we go. Some are joyful. I'm going to do it that way, it's better. Some happy. Some are sad. Some are frustrating. Okay. Now you can put whatever experiences you have, because I'm going to assume you have a lot. Some are anxious, obviously. Okay. But what happens if we just let that river of thought do what it's designed to do, and that's flow, no matter where it's at, whether it's here or here or here or here, without getting attached to it, because it's not so much the thinking that we have in the moment, it's what comes next. And that's a really important point. So for me, and kind of preparing for this today, I remembered an experience where I was talking about the phobia aspect with the glass that I would shake, and I got so fearful of that, so nervous of it, that all I had to do is sit there and watch telly. And I still remember to this day sitting there watching EastEnders, a scene in the Queen Vic, somebody about to pick up the pint, and off my head went into that world of fear. It was like, and I was living the experience in my head, okay? And then my whole state of mind, my mood just dropped in the moment. That makes sense. So what the difference is here now is almost I back off from my experience. If I'm not feeling good, if I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling socially anxious, frustrated, whatever, I'm kind of much more of the observer, consciously aware of it. And I let it do its thing that it's designed to do, to go through. Because the minute we start to make something of it, and let me illustrate this again. So here's the river. And here comes the thought of, I don't know, let's put, socially, oops, sorry. Let's put a thought of social anxiety in there. Maybe it's my experience in the Queen Vic, or watching, not being in the Queen Vic, but watching it on the TV. The minute that happens there, that thought comes in, oh gosh, that's a little bit like that, all right? It's not so much that thought. We can't control thoughts. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about controlling anything or reframing or doing any techniques at all, but just to simply be aware of what comes next. So for me, and I'm going to surmise what it was like for me back then, but it probably went something like, oh, that's a little bit like me in the pub, and they want me to go next week, and I can't go, and they must not like me, and they must think something's wrong, and because blah, blah, blah. And I'd start off in the Queen Vic and end up, oh, because I'm gay, I can't go there. All right? And it's almost like I put on the river here, with all that thinking, as soon as that thought came in, all that other thinking on top of it, ending up with I'm gay and can't go to that thing, it's like I've put a dam. So the river can't flow. The river of experience, the river of thought can't flow because it's hitting that dam. Okay? Does that make sense to people? Or just kind of a little bit? Okay. All right. As I say, what I don't want you to do is not an intellectual understanding. I just want you guys to kind of see what resonates and feels right for you. But boy, when you start to kind of see this a bit clearer, and you start to gain insight, and some of you might have a big insight into that. Some people, it happens incrementally over time, and might not even realize there's anything's changed, but things start to get easier. It's because experience is flowing more. You're more consciously aware. And I can safely say, because I have this experience, I now know this, I still get frustrated, I still get anxious, I still get angry. Steve will tell you all about those things. But I don't stick around. I don't have to live there anymore. I don't have to become those things. Okay, and those things even become like, oh, well, I'm just here now and that's fine. It's okay. Oh, I'm happy. That's good. Great. But I don't hold on to that either. It's just wherever I'm at is where I'm at. Just really being aware of the labels that come next. So I think I've said quite a lot, and I don't want to kind of keep going on and lose your attention and your valuable time tonight. So I think from there, we can kind of stop the presentation and opening up for a discussion and some conversation around that. Now, Steve, you're going to mute people. How do you want people to kind of work that?
Do you want me to stop the recording first of all?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to say before we do that, thank you so much, Tony, for what you shared. It's always interested on how you hear, because I knew none of what you were going to speak about. And it's always interesting. What I was being reminded of is that we are looking at the experience it's creating life. It's not what we're doing with it through the gift of thought. It's the experience that we would create within ourselves. And the more that we see that we are the creator of the experience, then it brings an empowerment, a natural empowerment back to that moment. So thank you for sharing that. I just want to say before we end this, you and I are actually doing a talk where we will explore this a lot more in detail in London. It's on the Meetup site. It's on the 20th of February. And it's going to be mental health that we're actually looking at. What do we mean when we talk about mental health? So it'd be lovely to see you there. If you've booked, we will happily welcome you. If you haven't, there's still a few spaces left. But for now, thanks again, Tony, and we'll continue the conversation off now. But for this time, we will stop it now. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.